Hello, everyone. Welcome back to SEC Roundup. My name is Tom Zucchero. I'm a partner in the Paul Hastings Investigation and White Collar Group. With me today, as always, is Nick Morgan, also a partner in the Paul Hastings Investigations and White Collar Group. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Tom.
And we are delighted to have with us Suzan Rose. Suzan is the Senior Advisor of Government and Regulatory Affairs for the Alternative Investment Management Association. Hi, Suzan. How are you?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So in prior SEC roundups, we've talked about some of the SEC's more recent rulemaking proposals. And today we thought we'd talk about the rulemaking process itself and the role investors and other market participants can have in the rulemaking procedures and comment process. So, Nick, let's start with you. What's going on with the status of SEC rulemaking in this current environment?
Tom, I have not gone back to compare the last 6 months to some prior 6-month period, but my sort of anecdotal reaction is we are in a historically unique period in terms of the number of rules being proposed by the SEC right now. And as you pointed out, we've talked about a number of them on prior episodes. These are huge rule changes if they become finalized. And the volume of rules is just, I think, unprecedented, although we'll have to go back and verify that. When we're talking about dozens of rules, each one of which will have a profound impact on the way the securities markets work in this country. And we don't really talk about this in our 8th grade civics class. We talk about the 3 branches of government, but when the SEC finalizes a rule, it has the force of law. So it's similar to a statute that's passed by Congress and signed by the president, except that it's not passed by Congress and signed by the president. It's
right.
proposed by a federal government agency. And the rules require that there be a comment period. So we're going to talk about that. And Suzanne's going to go into how the public can get involved. And this is really the opportunity for the SEC to hear about what the public thinks. So just very briefly, I took a look online today at the number of rules that have been proposed. There are actually 26 rules that have been proposed that are in what's called the final rule stage. And these are things from, and we've talked about some of these, public company ESG reporting, fund ESG reporting, the consolidated audit trail, 10b5-1 plans, cybersecurity breaches. And you could take any one of these, and these are hundreds of pages long, these proposals. So this is really some important stuff that's happening. But in addition to the proposed rules that have gotten a lot of sort of public comment and pushback from various constituencies in Congress, there are 28 more rules that are potentially on the books coming down the pipe. Mm-hmm. So I mean, this is truly a time to be paying attention to the rulemaking process, particularly at the SEC. So I think Suzanne's comments will be valuable and important at this point.
I hope
so. So Suzanne, we know you sat down recently with some senior SEC officials involved in the rulemaking process. Mm-hmm. We would love to hear your perspective on the rulemaking process, how well it's functioning, and whether the retail investor or others who are interested in the rules really can have a voice in the commission's final deliberations.
Sure. Well, in terms of how it's functioning, as Nick advised, there's quite a bit more to go. So it's hard to say. Most of the proposals are sitting there pending final rules. So it's not over yet. But in terms of the public and their involvement, whether retail investors, whether it's John Q. Public or a fund manager or a trade association, the situation's the same. Comments are important and the SEC expects to receive them. So take a step back. Consider this. Rule proposals are just that. They're proposals. Do you love what you see as is when one comes out? If you don't, then imagine living with what's being proposed for an indefinite period, say even decades, almost 60 years with the prior marketing rule. I don't know of anyone who would eagerly reply yes to that question. And even the SEC asks questions, and sometimes hundreds of them in their proposals. They seek input and question their own assumptions. So you'd sit there and say nothing. It's in your right to respond, and they expect to hear back from you. So the Congressional Review Act for major rules, and not all rules are major, but the ones you were referring to, Nick, for example, requires the SEC to provide a comment period. You should use it. And anyone can comment. All comments made during the comment period are available for the public to see. You can take a look for yourself. They're on their website. Some are made using a web form on the SEC's site for submission of generally shorter free text, and others, like trade associations like AIMA would submit, are more formal letters, and they're submitted as attachments, though also through their website. And as Nick and I were speaking about, I've seen some pretty short, pretty insulting jeers submitted by the public, and maybe on darker days, they might be a little entertaining to read. I've also, though, seen comment letters that are so comprehensive that they could use an executive summary. It'll run the gamut, but all of them have one thing in common. The SEC reads every single one. And I know that's hard to believe, but in a recent webinar, I asked the two of the rulemaking staff that were participating how they could possibly read all the comments, since the SEC isn't Santa Claus or anything. And the fact is, once a rule is proposed, the rulemaking staff works then to read, understand, and consider every single comment or issue that's raised by the public in response. And the commissioners themselves can and often do read many of the submissions, but for larger rules with sizable responses, the likelier scenario is that staff will divide and conquer. They read and summarize the concerns and issues raised by the public comments. So in terms of the comments themselves, they did shed some light on, well, not do's and don'ts, but some helpful hints, let's say. The more specific your comment, the better. So better not to just say, I hate this. And with respect to specificity, particularly when you can tie it back to specific questions that they've raised or to a practice or outcome they might not have considered in the rulemaking. Also good, where there are potential negative or unintended consequences that could be avoided if another approach were taken. So tell them what you think the alternative approach is. And look, there's something else to consider. It's a big team, and they often came from the very industry that would be subject to the rules. There's probably very little that they didn't consider in the rulemaking process, but that doesn't mean that they don't need to hear from you. So, look at it this way. If you've ever worked with a team on something and despite the greatness of your great ideas, they don't make the cut, why would you expect the SEC to be any different when they're making rules? Hearing from you might actually help highlight something that they might have considered but didn't ultimately address in the proposal, at least not directly. So, two other points I'd make about the comment process. And this one comes up a lot. Raising a question in a comment does not earn you a target on your back with the SEC. So good to just get that out of the way, and I addressed that point blank in my webinar. It's an often considered concern by members of the public in approaching the SEC just overall, and I'm sure you can relate relative to your clients. If the SEC retaliated for every unsupportive comment I've seen made, they'd have no time to make rules. And, look, as they stated in response to my point blank question, and I'm paraphrasing them, it's not even legal for them to do that. But I would say this: when you comment, choose your words carefully. If you're proposing something that might be seen remotely as fraud, or discussing a business practice of yours that could raise serious concerns under the rules, that could be a little unhelpful. At the very least, it's going to be out there for the public in the world to see, because rulemaking comments are public.
Suzan, I'll say that while the SEC may not be Santa Claus, they do seem to have their naughty and nice list. So
they do. Perhaps.
We're going to try to stay in the nice list.
Good.
Thank you so much for your time and your insights. It's very valuable to us and our listeners. Nick, Suzan, thank you very much. And everyone else, we'll see you at our next episode of SEC Roundup.
Thanks so much for having me.
Our pleasure.
Thanks. Bye.